Hey, welcome to Rob Paints Model. This is how to paint Garreks Reavers. Now I've already done part 1 of this, which covers how to do all the different skin tones. For this video I'm going to be painting Targor, who you can see here. He's the palest skin tone, but I chose him because he's got a bit of everything on him that applies to all of the model. I'm going for a more muted, desaturated colour palette with these guys than you normally see, because I think the bright red and the bright gold actually clashes quite badly. I've just painted everything that's not skin black to start off with. Now we're going to use WARPLOCK bronze, and we're going to dry brush this over all of the areas that are going to be gold or bronzy colour. Here we're going to dry brush RUNELORD brass over the gold areas. And now I'm going to paint all of the steel areas with gun grey. Pretty much just the blades of the weapons, but also some of the belt buckles. Now we're going to use my patented Armour Wash. Recipe will be in the doobly-doo. I've added a little bit of gloss medium to this just to make it flow into the recesses a bit better. But otherwise it's the same recipe as before, and we're just going to apply this to all of the metal areas, making sure that it doesn't pool too badly. Now once that's dry, we're going to do a dry brush of NECRON compound over all of the metal here. This is just to give it a little bit of a shine, a little bit of highlight. Don't want to go too heavy on this, you want to get as much off as possible. Now we're going to base coat the pants with INCUBI Darkness. This is going to take about 2 or 3 coats to cover nicely over the black, but we want a really nice smooth base coat of this colour. Now we're going to wash the pants with Nuln Oil. Try not to let it pool on the top surfaces too much, we just want this to get into the recesses to provide a little bit of shade. Now once that's dry, we're going to start mixing some CADIAN FLESHTONE into our INCUBI Darkness. Now I use a wet palette with this, which makes it much easier. The idea with using CADIAN FLESHTONE to highlight INCUBI Darkness is that essentially it's muting the colour. So all the CADIAN FLESHTONE you add is bringing it closer towards a grey mid-tone. And we're just going to use very thin glazes of this to try and highlight the pants. There's a lot of glaze on this, but the whole process took about 10 minutes per model to do this. We're just going to keep adding a little bit more of CADIAN FLESHTONE in. And keep doing glazes, just covering less area than before each time. Always moving the paint from the darkest areas to the lightest areas. As you can see, the brightest highlight doesn't actually look like CADIAN FLESHTONE, it's still got a lot of the green in there. And then once you've done highlighting, just use a little bit of the INCUBI Darkness, just thin down to a glaze consistency, and just glaze that back into the shadows to create the transition. Like I said, it only takes about 10 minutes per model to do that. Now we're going to use some Mephiston Red and ABADDON Black, and we're going to mix these together to create a very dark red. and we're going to use this as our base colour for the armour plates. Just going to keep adding a little bit more Mephiston red into our mix, keeping the consistency nice and thin, and again glazing from the darker areas to the lighter areas, making sure the paint pool's where we want it. As you can see, red looks a lot brighter when it's going on than when it's dry, because it dries very translucent. So you're going to need 2 to 3 layers of each colour just to build up the effect. Just apply it to a smaller and smaller area each time you do this. I actually always use the tip on this to kind of create a little streaky effect. I'm just going to mix in some Evil Sunz Scarlet into our red. Now I'm going to apply an edge highlight with CADIAN FLESHTONE, and I'm actually using the tip of the brush here and a stippling motion against the edge to create a kind of dinged effect rather than a solid single edge highlight. I'm just going to create a few more extra dings with Pallid Witch Flesh here. We're also going to create some little scratches on the surface, just some thinned Pallid Witch Flesh, making some short, straight lines in just a few places. Then we're going to use some ABADDON black thinned down, and you're going to paint that in a line immediately above where you painted the Pallid Witch Flesh, and that essentially is creating a shadow above the Pallid Witch Flesh's highlight, and it creates the impression of depth. Now we're going to use a mix of ABADDON Black and Dark Reaper, and we're going to base coat all of our black leather areas with this. So that's the belt, wristbands, and the little dangly leather straps that are hanging off their belts on some of them. Now I'm just adding a little bit more Dark Reaper in each time for these highlights. Just adding a little bit more Dark Reaper in, painting a little smaller area, and only painting where the light would be catching the surfaces. So you see I just added a little bit more Dark Reaper to my paint there, painting a transition in to bring out the curve of those dangly straps there. Now here I've already painted the cloth with Skaven Blight Dinge, and now I'm highlighting it with Storm Vermin Fur. This is pretty much just layering. I'm not really bothering with glazes too much because it's such a small area. And I'm going to glaze in the shadows afterwards in order to smooth the transitions a bit. Now I'm going to mix some Pallid Witch Flesh into the Skaven Blight Dinge and do a first edge highlight with this. And then I'm going to use just a straight neat Pallid Witch Flesh just to touch the corners. Now I'm edge highlighting all of the black leather using Rust Grey. Now we're using Ulthuan Grey, and I'm just dotting where the corners are of the leather, or where a scratch meets an edge. I'm going to wash both the cloth and the leather areas with Nuln Oil. Now I'm going to paint the hair with ABADDON black here. And we're going to mix again some Dark Reaper into our black, just to create a slightly off black, slightly blue tinged colour. So just using the surface of the hair here and the edge of the brush to try and create our first layer, essentially, of the hair colour. I'm going to mix a little dot of Ulthuan Grey into my previous colour, and I'm going to create a gradient which I'm going to be choosing from throughout this process for each highlight. I'm going to be highlighting the areas that are perpendicular to my light source. That's actually the areas which appear curved in this particular hair, but that's because as they're perpendicular to the light source, they're actually going to be reflecting back towards the viewer better. So we're just building that up using the colours that are in the gradient on the palette, and then using a little Ulthuan Grey just to do a little dot highlight in the very brightest area. Now we're going to paint all of the wrapped cloth areas with Rakarth flesh. Also painting the skull at this point, as that's going to be the base colour for the skull later on. And I'll be given this recipe for the skull when I do the base at the end of the video, because it's all the same recipe. Now I'm going to shade all of those wrapped cloths with Garreks Earthshade. I actually applied this a little bit before the Rakarth flesh was fully dry, and you can see the effect that it has later on. It kind of dries in a weird way, so just be careful and make sure that you do this when everything is dry. I'm also applying it onto the skull because, again, that's going to be the next stage on the skull. So I'm doing a second coat of Garreks here because it didn't come out exactly how I wanted or as dark as I wanted, and that's because the Rakarth flesh was still wet when I applied it. Now I'm going to take some VMA Burnt Umber, and I'm just going to use that to line the wrappings, just using the tip of my brush and just letting the recesses of the sculpt guide where that goes. Now I'm going to use some thinned down Druchii Violet, and I'm just going to glaze that into the shadows on the skin. For making the scarred tissue look more bruised, you want to use the Druchii Violet just around the scar tissue, as it will make it look nice and damaged. I'm also applying some blood for the Blood God for my blood effects, painting it into that big gnarly cut on his chest, and I'm also going to mix that in with some black paint and paint a few little cuts and scratches on his skin. So now we're on to the base. And this is just paint the base with Skaven Blight Dinge, dry brush it with Longbeard Grey. And then we're going to apply some Nuln Oil all over that. Once that's dry, we're going to dry brush it with Longbeard Grey again. Now we're going to base coat all of the skulls with Rakarth Flesh. Now we're going to wash all of those skulls with Garreks Earthshade. Now we're going to use Rakarth Flesh, and this is relatively thin, and we're just going to kind of layer up some highlights on these and just tidy up where the Garreks Earthshade got where we didn't want it. Then we're going to use some Pallid Witch Flesh, and again this is very thin, and just glazing up some highlights into the middles of the skulls. Now I'm painting some Storm Vermin fur into the piles of dirt or ash or whatever that is. That's just to distinguish it a little bit more from the cracked earth. Then I'm going to dry brush everything again with Longbeard Grey. This is just a very light dry brush, mostly just to catch the piles of dirt that I've just painted. I'm not that bothered if it catches the edges of the skulls, because you're not going to notice it. Now I'm just going to apply some Athonian Camo Shade onto the piles of dirt. So that's Garreks Reavers. It took me a lot of attempts to find a colour scheme that I was happy with, and I stripped these guys 5 times in the process of doing this video. So that combined with the holiday season and work things meant I was late. I'm sorry for that. However, in the meantime, since the last video went up, I've gained something like 1,300 subscribers, which is terrifying, quite frankly. I don't know what happened, but thank you to everyone who has subscribed in the last few weeks. You're all great, and I hope to keep making more videos in the future. I'm going to try and get back onto a weekly schedule. Next week I'll be tackling the Iron Jaws Uruks for Shadespire, and I already have a test model who should be on screen by now already. You can see we're going to be painting yellow, and we're going to be painting yellow by first painting pink. That's right, pink. So keep an eye out for that one. It should be coming up next week. It's going to be a lot faster than this one because I already know how to paint them, and I already know how to paint orcs because I paint a lot of orcs because I have an orc army. So that should be good. It will also include a skin tone recipe for painting orcs that is a brush version of the airbrush tutorial for painting orc skin tones that's on the channel. So if you want to know how to paint that skin tone using just a brush, stay tuned for that video. That's it. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, shout at people in the street that they should subscribe to Rob Paints Models on YouTube. Don't do that. And yeah, thanks for all the subscribers, and here's to getting to a bigger number, because that's what you do with numbers. You make numbers go up, and then you have succeeded in life, and you can feel fulfilled in your sense of purpose, or not. Bye!